If there is no self, who is asking? The Buddha's silent answer. Have you ever simply stopped and wondered very deeply, what is this I that I feel myself to be? It's a question that seems to touch something fundamental about being human. We naturally look for a center, a core identity, something that feels solid and unchanging amidst all the changes in our lives, our bodies, and our feelings. We search for a fixed me. But then, you might encounter a teaching from the heart of Buddhism. It's the teaching of Anatta, often spoken of as no self. This idea suggests that there isn't a permanent, independent self in the way we usually think about it. For many, hearing this for the first time can feel quite unsettling. If there's no fixed me, then who is experiencing this? Who is thinking? Who is feeling? It can seem confusing, perhaps even a little strange, maybe even making you feel like the ground beneath you is unsteady. This brings us to a moment in the Buddha's life that highlights this very puzzle. When asked directly about the existence of the self, asked, does a self exist? And then, does a self not exist? The Buddha remained silent. He gave no yes and no no. Why would a teacher of such deep clarity and wisdom choose silence on such a fundamental question about who we are? If his teaching points to no self, why not just state it clearly? What deeper truth was held within that silence? This is the puzzle we will explore together. We'll try to understand why the Buddha chose silence and what that silence, along with the teaching of no self, truly means for us. Chapter 1. The Mystery of Buddha's Silence. That moment, when the Buddha chose silence after being asked directly about the self, is not a sign that he didn't know the answer. Far from it. He later explained the deep wisdom behind this to his student, Anatta. It was a deliberate teaching. According to the Buddha's teaching, if he had simply answered yes, a self exists, it would have reinforced a widely held belief at that time. This belief was in a permanent, unchanging soul or essence, something that is the real you and lasts forever, separate from everything else. This idea is sometimes called the eternalist view. But the Buddha's fundamental insight was that all things are impermanent and lack a fixed, independent nature. Saying yes would have contradicted this core truth and simply strengthened a mistaken idea that the questioner, like many people, was holding on to. However, simply saying no, a self does not exist, also presented a problem. While the teaching of Anatta points away from a permanent self, a simple no could easily lead to another misunderstanding. It could lead to the view called annihilationism or nihilism, the belief that death is the absolute end, that nothing continues, and that actions have no lasting effects. This view can undermine moral responsibility. More importantly, for that specific seeker, hearing no could have caused great fear and distress. It might feel like being told that the very sense of being a person, the I they experienced, was completely unreal, causing a painful sense of loss. The Buddha showed compassion by not wanting to push someone into such a confusing and potentially harmful view if they weren't ready. The Buddha saw that the way the question was asked was the issue. It forced an answer within a simple either-or framework. Is it this or is it that? The question treated the self as if it were a solid object you could either find or not find, existing independently. The Buddha avoided being drawn into this limited way of thinking, which couldn't capture the more complex and dynamic reality he understood. So, his silence was not emptiness or avoidance. It was a powerful, skillful teaching. It demonstrated his wisdom in understanding the questioner's mindset and his compassion in guiding them away from harmful extremes. It was a deliberate act designed to break through a limited way of asking and thinking. It was an invitation to look deeper, to see that the truth about the self is not found in the fixed answers of yes, it is a permanent thing, or no, it is nothing at all. It was guiding the seeker towards a different kind of understanding beyond those two extremes. Think about music from an instrument again. If you ask, is the music a permanent thing inside the instrument? A simple yes or no doesn't explain what music truly is. Music doesn't exist as a solid, unchanging object inside. It arises when many things come together. The instrument, the strings, the player's skill, the air. It's a process, a flow, not a fixed entity. The Buddha's silence pointed towards understanding the self in a similar way. Not as a fixed thing you can point to and say it exists or it doesn't exist, but as something that arises and continues in a dependent, flowing manner. His silence was a nudge toward seeing this deeper truth, which simple yes or no questions about a solid self cannot capture. Chapter 2. The Self We Often Mistake. Let's continue our conversation, thinking about that sense of I we carry with us every day. The Buddha's silence wasn't a denial of our experience of being a person. Instead, it was a pointer, gently guiding us to look closely at the kind of self we often assume is real, the one that the seeker in our story was likely thinking about. What is this self that most of us unconsciously feel is at the center of our world? It's the feeling of something inside that is always the same, no matter what happens outside. It feels like a core part of us that doesn't change with age, sickness, or even death. It feels like a single, whole thing, separate from everything else, existing on its own. It feels like it has a fixed nature, a specific essence that makes me me. And deep down, it often feels like this self is in charge, the one controlling our body and mind, making all the decisions. We imagine this sense of I in different ways. Sometimes it feels like a soul, something pure and spiritual that is completely separate from the body and will last forever. Other times, it feels like a quiet observer inside our head, a little person watching everything that happens without being affected by it. It can also feel like the boss, the command center, making everything happen. These are just different pictures we create of this solid, separate self. Why do we hold on to this idea so strongly? Our language is built around it. We constantly use words like I and mine. We say, I think, I feel, my body, my ideas. This way of speaking strengthens the feeling of a central I that owns things and does things. Also, our minds have a strong habit of seeing the things that make us up: our body, our feelings, our thoughts, our perceptions, our awareness, and immediately labeling them as me or mine. We identify with them so closely that they seem to be this solid self. And honestly, the idea of having a fixed self can feel safe. In a world that is always changing, believing in a stable me can feel like having something solid to hold on to. But this clinging to a mistaken idea of a fixed, separate self has consequences. According to the Buddha's teaching, it is a source of suffering. When reality shows us that nothing is permanent, that our bodies change, our feelings pass, we lose things we identify with. This clashes with our desire for an unchanging self. This clash creates pain, fear of getting old, fear of death, sadness when we lose something or someone we see as mine. This belief in a separate I also creates a feeling of being cut off from others, leading to selfishness and conflict, a sense of us versus them. So, understanding this mistaken self, the one we imagine as fixed, separate, and controlling, is a first step. This self is not a solid reality. It is more like a picture or a story our mind creates and holds on to. Seeing this picture for what it is, a mental construction, helps us begin to understand what the teaching of no self is truly pointing towards. Chapter 3. No Self, Anatta, and the No Self Puzzle, the Real Nature. When the Buddha spoke of Anatta, he wasn't saying that you don't exist at all, like a stone or empty space. That would be falling into the extreme view of nothingness we talked about avoiding. Instead, Anatta means not self, or lacking a fixed, independent nature. The Buddha taught that it denies the existence of that permanent, separate, unchanging self we often imagine is somewhere inside us, the one we discussed earlier. It means that none of the things that make up our experience, not our body, not our feelings, not our thoughts, nothing, is that kind of fixed self, and none of these things belong to such a fixed self. So if there's no fixed self sitting inside, who is it that lives? Who experiences joy or sadness? Who makes choices? The Buddha explained that what we call a person, what we experience as I, is actually a collection of constantly changing parts working together. He described these as the five aggregates, or Skandhas. First, there is the form aggregate. This is our physical body, the material part of us. Second is feeling. These are our sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings that arise when we experience things. Third is perception. This is how we recognize things, how we label what our senses bring in, forming ideas about the world. Fourth, our mental formations. This is a big one. It includes our intentions, our habits, our attitudes, our will, all the active mental processes that shape how we react and think. Karma, the force of our actions, is also rooted here. Fifth is consciousness. This is the basic awareness that sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, and is aware of mental objects like thoughts and feelings. What we call I, or self, is like a name we give to the continuous flow and interaction of these five aggregates. Think of a car. A car isn't one single unchanging thing. It's a collection of parts, engine, wheels, body, seats, working together. We give the name car to this collection. Or think of a flame. Is there a fixed flame thing? No, it's a process of burning, depending on fuel and air. It exists, but as a dynamic process, not a solid object. In the same way, the Buddha taught that the self is a label for the flowing, interdependent process of the five aggregates. Now this brings up the puzzle that often arises with the no-self idea. If there's no fixed self, then who is responsible for the actions we do? Karma. Who is it that might be reborn? Who is doing the spiritual practice? Who becomes enlightened? The answer to this puzzle lies in the teaching of Dependent Origination, or Pratītyasamutpāda. The Buddha taught that reality works through cause and effect, through things arising in dependence on other things. There isn't a fixed doer or a fixed receiver, but a continuous flow of conditions. Actions, karma, create results, and these results influence the ongoing flow of the aggregates, particularly the stream of consciousness and mental formations. This stream, though constantly changing, carries the potential, the seeds of past actions forward. It's like one candle lighting another. There's continuity, but no single, unchanging self jumping from one candle to the next. Spiritual practice is about working with this flow, purifying the aggregates. Enlightenment isn't a fixed self reaching a goal. It's the ending of the suffering-filled flow, the stopping of the causes that create suffering. As it's sometimes said, suffering exists, but no sufferer is found. Deeds exist, but no doer is found. This understanding that there is no fixed self applies to everything, not just people. The Buddha reminded us that all phenomena are without self. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Phenomena means all things and experiences, everything that exists, whether physical or mental. They all lack a fixed, independent nature, an inherent self, or controlling essence. This teaching of Anatta is one of the three fundamental characteristics of reality that the Buddha pointed to, along with impermanence, anicca, that everything changes, and unsatisfactoriness or suffering, dukkha, that clinging to impermanent things brings pain. So, no self isn't a negative statement saying you don't exist. It is a profound recognition of the true nature of existence, a dynamic, interdependent flow of components, without a fixed, unchanging I at the center. It's seeing things as they truly are. Chapter 4. No self in daily life and extreme views to avoid. In our everyday lives, we use the word I constantly. We feel like individuals. We wake up, eat, work, feel happy or sad, interact with others. So, how does this understanding that there is no fixed, permanent self make sense in the middle of all this living? Understanding no self doesn't mean that this everyday experience suddenly stops, or that we become uncaring or passive. We still exist and function in the world, and the conventional language of I and you is perfectly useful for navigating life. The difference lies not in whether we function, but in how we understand that functioning and the attitude we bring to it. Someone who strongly believes in a solid, separate self often sees life as happening to this me. Their feelings, thoughts, and possessions are tightly linked to this central idea, leading to fear of losing them and a strong sense of wanting things for this me. But as understanding grows, even slightly, we start to see these everyday activities, thinking, feeling, doing, not as the actions of a fixed I, but as the natural working of the components we discussed earlier, arising due to conditions. There's less clinging, less intense identification with these changing experiences as being a permanent me. This shift in understanding brings real benefits to our lives. When the tight grip of a fixed I loosens, the suffering caused by clinging starts to lessen. We are less afraid of change, less upset by loss, less bothered by criticism, because these things are seen as happening to a flowing process, not threatening a solid, unchanging core. This allows for more ease and resilience. It also helps us connect with others more naturally, seeing that everyone is part of this same interdependent flow. Compassion arises more easily when the barrier of a separate self isn't so solid. This understanding supports the growth of wisdom. seeing things as they truly are, interconnected and impermanent. It helps us find an inner freedom from the constant effort to protect and maintain a fixed self that is, in reality, not there. This understanding also helps us avoid getting stuck in extreme views about life and death. One extreme is believing in a permanent soul that lasts forever, the eternalist view. The teaching of Anatta gently shows us that this idea doesn't match the reality of impermanence. The other extreme is believing that when the body dies, everything completely ends, that nothing continues, and therefore nothing we do truly matters. The annihilationist view. A correct understanding of no self, combined with the understanding of how things arise depending on conditions, shows a continuity of cause and effect, action and result, even without a fixed self. This middle way, avoiding these two extremes, is where wisdom and freedom are found. So integrating the understanding of no self isn't about disappearing. It's about living more fully, more mindfully, and with less suffering, by seeing through an illusion that causes so much pain and confusion. It's about finding a balanced way to be in the world, free from the pull of these extreme ideas. Chapter 5. Your Path to Seeing No Selves. The insights pointed to by the Buddha's silence and the teaching of Anatta open a door to something very important: freedom from suffering. This teaching isn't meant to be just a difficult idea to think about. It touches the very core of how we experience being alive every single day. It shows us that the feeling of a fixed, unchanging I at the center of everything is not a solid reality. Instead, our experience is like a river flowing, a dynamic collection of changing elements: our body, our feelings, our thoughts, and our awareness, all working together, arising and passing away depending on countless conditions. The real power of this teaching comes when we begin to look at our own lives through this lens. It's not about telling yourself there is no self as a dry statement. It's about gently looking at your own experience and seeing the nature of things directly. How can you do this in a simple, kind way? You can start by just noticing. When you feel a strong emotion, like happiness or sadness, pause for a moment. Where is that feeling located? Is there a permanent you separate from the feeling, holding it? Or does the feeling just arise, stay for a while, and then change or pass away like a visitor? Notice your thoughts. They appear in your mind. They might stay for a bit. They might lead to other thoughts, but eventually they move on. Are they a fixed part of a permanent I? Or are they simply mental events arising depending on conditions? Look at your physical body. It's constantly changing, cell by cell, moment by moment. Is this changing form a fixed, unchanging I? This kind of gentle, honest looking, sometimes supported by quiet sitting practice, helps you see that the things you usually identify with most strongly are actually changing, dependent, and not a fixed self. It's not about becoming empty or uncaring. It's about letting go of a heavy weight, the constant, often unconscious effort to protect and maintain an idea of a fixed self that doesn't truly exist. It's like realizing you can open your hand after holding a tight fist for a long, long time. This seeing, this gradual letting go, brings a quiet sense of healing and freedom. It allows you to face the changes and difficulties of life with a little more space, a little less fear, because there isn't a solid I that feels so threatened. It allows for a deeper connection with others, seeing that we are all part of this same flowing reality. It is a path towards true peace, found not by building up a stronger self, but by seeing through the illusion of a fixed one. Understanding this takes patience. It is a process of gentle looking and learning. Be kind to yourself as you explore. Continue to listen, to read, and most importantly, to simply notice your own experience with an open heart. Thank you for being here and sharing this time. May you find peace and clarity in your own journey of seeing.